So, Navkiran, first of all, I would like to congratulate you for bringing Baazi Games to such heights, and thank you for joining us today for this conversation. As far as I know, Baazi Game was founded in 2014 by yourself, Saurabh Chopra and Puneet Dua. And Baazi Game is today India's one of the leading online real money gaming and fantasy sport company. I think PokerBaazi, RummyBaazi, BalleBaazi are few one of the most engaging games available on internet from Baazi Games as on date. I've also read that you have recently announced that you would be investing around 5 million in startups and developing new technologies in online gaming industry.
Yeah.
And I think few days back, I think you have also got some funding. I think 3 to 4 million, I believe, if I'm not wrong.
I mean, so in college, poker was a big hobby for me, and that's the only thing I did. And there was around 2013 is when I'd gone to US with my parents, and I happened to be at World Series of Poker. That's an event in Las Vegas, and I saw the game as a sport for the first time, and I realized that there was a dearth of operators in India that were giving this online poker service to these customers.
Right.
So once I came back, and it was an instant hit that time, and that's when I decided to actually venture into PokerBaazi. And once PokerBaazi kicked off, and it was a bootstrap company, and once it kicked off and we became a little successful, we raised our first round, and then we started venturing into different businesses. We started fantasy business as our initial investment, and then eventually we ended up being into the Rummy business. And of course, along the way, we also invested in a lot of these small tech startups, I would call it.
Right.
And that would, of course, with the idea of supporting our core businesses.
Right.
And that's the basic journey. And if you see the group of founders in the company, there are lots of guys from the same college. We're all from Manipal. There are lots of guys from that college.
Right.
So, yeah.
Great. So, and which have helped you as an individual and the company to grow up to the current level?
I mean, see, like I mentioned, it was a bootstrap company, so turning green was a very important stage in the business.
Right. Absolutely.
Our focus, like your book says, was on customer retention earlier on, because for us, when you're a bootstrap company, stickiness, retention cohorts are the only Bibles for you.
Right.
So once basically we had reached about a revenue of about $1 million in PokerBaazi, I would call it, that's the time we were, profitable enough to then venture into different businesses. I would say, once that happened and we were able to raise our first round of about $5 million as our primary investment.
Right.
That was a very key milestone in that phase, because that gave us leverage, to invest into technology, invest into better staffing. And once we did that, everything else was like a process. The entire story after that is like a story that can be done through a process. When I say that, everything just followed after that. Once we had that first raise, everything was a smaller milestone than the first one.
I'm sure.
And with BalleBaazi, I think Jugaad Singh, hiring him was a key milestone as well, because that changed the entire brand face. Of course, before we launched BalleBaazi, we'd already mastered the art of, using data for customer analytics and, UI, UX and everything around that. So post that, I would say, hiring our first brand ambassador was Sunny Leone, by the way. That gave us, and she gave us a, different kind of publicity. It did become viral, and that time she was the most Googled celebrity. So we hired her for PokerBaazi initially. We scaled up to a certain extent, and then when we entered into BalleBaazi, we focused on cricket as a sport. BalleBaazi says cricket all over it. And then when we hired Yuvraj, it gave us a different scale and a different brand communication strategy as well.
Right.
So those, I would say, have been our key milestones.
Oh, fantastic. So if you talk about Puneet and Saurabh both, and you all were, I think, from college days, you were together. My other question is based on that only, that how did you manage to manage it at Baazi Games, and how do you leverage each other's strength, and how do you avoid those conflicts which are generally together when you work together?
I mean, when you work with friends, there is a different, chemistry, because you can really rely on them.
Yeah,
I mean, you could just tell them this has to be done, this will be done. So, number of hours, those kind of things always go out of the question. There are different challenges, I would say, in a negative way, where, it would be more of personal challenges, because you have to kind of balance that, professionalism and friendship all the time. I mean, for me individually, if you ask me, that has been my biggest challenge ever. Because I have so many people that have even joined after we started Baazi, and they were all friends earlier. So balancing that has been a very, very key important role. But I think everyone understands that, we all have one goal, and we always keep reminding each other that this is the end goal. Let the egos be aside when we're talking about work. So I think the team's done that perfectly well. And the positives are so many, right? You can call up anyone at any time. There's always a backup for a backup. And I think in organizations, this is the number one question, right? I mean, who is the person that can do your work? If you answer that question in the organization, I think everything gets answered, because then the team leads train their subordinates. The subordinates then do knowledge sharing. So, I mean, that way it's been easier for us, because there's always been a backup and a backup for a backup. So I think that's played to our strengths.
I think very well said. I think you explained it in a very well manner. I think the key challenge for any, especially that at top management, is that who can replace you, right? And if you have those backups, I think your organization is blessed in that way.
Yeah.
So moving on to my next question, I think you've been through a lot of journey till now, and you've been handling a lot of challenges and then achieving a lot of milestones.
I mean, it would be across the board when I say, because when you keep scaling, you need to keep hiring people. You need to keep making sure that they understand the culture of the company. Data sits on top of the, it's a part of the DNA, literally, and people need to really adapt and know how to use data. So when you're scaling, sometimes it becomes a challenge, incorporating those values in the new hires. And because earlier on, our biggest challenge was, how do we use this data? What do we really store, and how do we use that data for customer insights, for better CX experience? And that was one of the biggest challenges for us initially. And that still remains a challenge when you're trying to scale up, because when you keep hiring newer people, you have to keep incorporating that value to them. So sometimes it becomes a challenge where they don't really understand the value of data and customer experience, because eventually that is what drives any organization or any business. I would say that has been generally, there are people who kind of work in silos. I would say there are different teams, like the product team and the analytics team, and I would say the customer retention team. They all have to work together based on one data. And there are a lot of A/B tests that are done by one team, right? I mean, if there is a test that has been done by, say, the retention team, I mean, and they have documented the result of that A/B test. Now, of course, that A/B test results need to be shared across the board, so that the other team members or the other team verticals don't waste their time on doing the same test. I think that is the key challenge for us, and that will always remain as a challenge, I feel.
I understand that. I think the nature of your business is such that you have to continuously evolve, I think, on this particular problem.
Yeah.
Right. Fantastic. And I think other question is, which is, because since when you grow up from a bootstrapping level to the current level, and then you have future plans, I think one of the very important, I think, thin line which I've seen is that either you make a mistake or you delay a decision. So sometimes you choose that when you're not sure about a particular decision, right? So
Yeah, in fact, I say this almost every third day of my work life. I mean, to all the people who work under me, I always tell them most of the entrepreneurs today fail because they don't back their gut instinct that much. I mean, of course, data tells the story. I mean, data sometimes cannot get into predictability so much that it can accurately tell you something that is surely going to happen. So sometimes when you're 100% sure, like, it's sometimes you're 50% sure about certain thing, you should always do it, see the results, track it. And especially if it's in the start of the business. I mean, if say I have 10 decisions to make, we as an organization make sure that we do those 10 things and then evaluate. Of course, when we have to do those 10 things, we dig deep into the data, find out what can be done better, how and why are we doing it. And if we say get certain predictability that is as high as 50%, we back ourselves and do it. A lot of entrepreneurs, in fact, in my batch, or a lot of people I've met, they fail to make the right decisions because they actually don't end up making a lot of decisions. I mean, we ourselves, I believe if there are 10 decisions to make, we end up making 10 decisions out of that. 5 will be successful, 5 won't be. Basic math. But I feel the 5 will take you further ahead, and the 5 that you go wrong with will give you enough learning to improve. But on the other hand, if you don't really make those decisions quickly, you let the other guys go ahead, and B, you don't have enough learning as well to scale further. And I always feel that the wrong decisions have given me the highest amount of lessons.
Absolutely.
So that's really helped.
Any incident you want to share where you think you have gone by gut and then it backfired? And
I mean, so many. I mean, I really can't pinpoint one, but there are so many of them. There was this one condition where we felt if we could change the format of onboarding, because we felt that the user was actually getting stuck from the sign up page to the registration page, and we felt that if we could do this small change, we could reduce that time frame. But once we did it, in fact, there were other factors that were also involved as a part of that, where compliance is also get included. KYC's journey eventually, so there are two methods. One, you do KYC's journey at the start. The other method is where you do KYC's journey at the withdrawal. Once we did the other thing, we realized that there was much higher drop-offs. And there are smaller things. I mean, this is one of those things. I think there are so many of these bad decisions that I've made on the way, which I mean, people don't see because people see the growth of the company. But I've actually grown because of those bad decisions. Yeah.
But KYC, I think, is one element in India, especially, and I've seen company going from here to there. Like telecom has a moment there was a new policy on KYC from government regulation and all that.
Yeah.
The entire process get into a different mode. So I think KYC is one of the major point where people have seen sudden withdrawal, sudden decline in sales, and sudden jump in sales. Right? And still it's not been addressed at that level. I think.
So I do actually have an example where some of these bad decisions helped me make a good decision. Something related to the same process. Once you log into any of our platforms, you have to make a username. And we realized that in that process there were 70% drop-offs on the day 0. Right, and the only single thing that we changed after that bad mistake was we started suggesting users' name, and we saw an uptick of about 37% on day 0. I mean, that's the kind of conversion rate change that happened on day 0 itself. With that small mistake that we did, that taught us, and then we did this. So we just realized that users are actually very lazy. I mean, it's not in a derogatory way, but you have to kind of give them that experience where they really it just flows. Experience needs to flow.
That's so seamless. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I think you made very valid point on that. And now moving to another important part of the business, which is funding nowadays. So, and it is one of the important milestones, like you also said, and because from taking an idea to an execution level, funding is an important milestone. So what is the right amount of funding? What is the right time for funding? And how was your journey? If you can share with the viewers, like how was your journey and what went wrong with you and what went right with you, so that people can learn from you and can maybe take a right decision.
I mean, so we started our business in the era where, there was a rush of funding, and it is still there. Yeah. Sometimes, entrepreneurs make a mistake where they chase growth because they feel raising the first pre-round or the seed A round is much easier. So they actually forget the long-term values of creating a sustainable business. Sometimes, when they get lured into this round of raising, they forget the exit strategy, right? I mean, before the funding, you need to be clear what the exit strategy is going to be for your business. Is it, for the investors as well, or the stakeholders? Is it going to be, and when is the right profitability margin or the time frame for your business? So you need to be able to predict that before you actually figure out and sit on the road and decide what kind of money your organization needs. I mean, today, there are different businesses that require huge amount of funding, but eventually there always has to be an end goal for every business. Some businesses take a longer time to be successful. Some, some take a lesser time, right? And if the business is going to take a longer time frame, the founder needs to be clear from the day, way one, how his journey is going to be for the next, say, 5 years of that business. When does he actually need funds? And is he acquiring those users profitably? Because sometimes, I've seen that when people raise funds, they forget that, CAC, they forget the relation between CAC and LTV. Eventually, LTV has to be a minimum of, say, 5 times the CAC value. And sometimes when the users are chasing growth, as in the entrepreneurs are chasing growth, they forget that simple correlation. And I think so that maths and the data has to be very clear. And I would say, like, your groundwork has to be very clear. I mean, there has to be a reason why someone should add fuel to your fire, right? And if you can't explain why an investor should be adding that fuel, I think then you don't really need funding, you need guidance, right? So, I mean, so there's a difference. I think every founder eventually gets to know when his company is really ready in his heart. Right. And I think, so there is no particular time frame for any company, but I think if the business is sold in a way where, you can maintain your CAC values even at a higher spend, I mean, then is the time to really add the fuel. And of course, maintain the LTV as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think you're very well said. And I think real money in games in India is always a point of, debate, I believe.
If you see European markets, they're very regulated. Very structured. There is a proper guideline defined for every operator that's there in the market. India is definitely getting there. I feel India, being such a big potential for RNG games, will get there. I mean, it's a matter of how and when. I mean, there are different bodies that are representing the games of skill in India, and they fairly have a very clear idea about how this needs to be done, because for India it's relatively easy because we are definitely behind the other countries. So there is a precedent that we can follow. Europe has set a good precedent in terms of how it should be structured. So I mean, it's there. But I think as far as the other companies and us are concerned, we have self-regulated ourselves right now. I mean, we are following what the other markets have been doing. I mean, there is responsible gaming that needs to be followed. There needs to be, deposit limits, transaction limits, certain guidelines about how your processes have to be with respect to RNGs and other stuff. So, I mean, there is a lot of study available already in the market. So India right now is in the phase of self-regulation. And there are bodies that are doing a really good work in making sure that the right communication is being sent to every, founder or the company that is involved in RMG.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, I think I'm moving on to a very important question, especially related to your business. I think customer feedback is very important in evolving any product. And I think gaming is one such industry where success depends on the engagement level of the user. And if you can share a few examples where you have actually changed the product to from pure after listening to the voice of customers and then making a change into it, and then seeing a very positive impact on the product. Like one you have already explained me that by just changing the username system, I think you've seen the jump of 37%. I'm sure there would be other things also. So how do you create the system where you continuously keep on capturing the voice of the customer and evolving your product to increase your engagement level?
I mean, so when I talk about CX specifically, the first thing I say is that it's not particular to one department. It's not something that is related to customer service. A lot of people actually, when they talk about customer experience, they relate it to customer service. And if you're talking about businesses like ours, I mean that an ideal e-commerce business would be one where the customer really doesn't even have to talk to the customer service. Right, that should be the experience. So, I mean, to get to that, sometimes you have to listen to customers. Sometimes you have to take their data inputs. I mean, in a more secured way, and understand data. Understand what is the pain point of every customer, every single page, and changing your UI UX designs according to product analytics is a very key important role. Now, of course, this is something related to the product side of things. There is something that is related to the customer side of things as well, if the need comes to that. Even the customer service needs to know exactly where and how is the customer reaching. Today, in the customer service area, since we were scaling, we had to get our chatbots integrated. Now, understanding what questions the customers are asking again plays a very important role, because you then need to prepare your content of FAQs according to the questions they're asking. Now, we've built very successful models based on AI and ML on those questions as well, where the chatbots are being fed FAQs based on the customer inputs. So that aligns our customer service. Similarly, with respect to customer retention, when I talk about retention, of course, I have to cover the customer experience part when I get to that. So even for that, we segmented the customers based on their behavior, and then we send personalized communication. There is recommendation system that is there. If you see how Netflix has been a differentiating factor with respect to all its other competitors, it's basically based on the recommendation system. There is so much content available on every single e-commerce platform. There are, like in our case, there are so many games that are running on our platform. So showing that personalized content to that segment plays a very important role. So, I mean, today you as a user, if you join the platform, you need to be seeing what you really like. And if I don't show you, I mean, like I said, customers are very lazy. Sometimes they won't even scroll down to see what's really happening, and they'll probably, lose their interest. So you have to capture that, formulate that data, and then transform into customer experience. And that is not just on the product side, it's on every single aspect of the business. What you're marketing today, if I'm marketing you, come play on PokerBaazi this tournament, and you've seen that ad and come on my platform, and you don't see that communication anywhere, your interest is going to get lost. So I have to make sure from the marketing side as well that, I'm taking that experience and sending the same communication strategy across the board as well, if you're first coming on the platform. So every single thing is based on that, how your tutorials work. Again, that is also on customer input. Now, when I say customer input, it doesn't need to be a verbal input. Data gives you that input anyway when you're logging in so many events. So you take that event, put it into different models that we've created, it just gives out a beautiful harmony of, customer experience with all the other departments then. Yeah.
Great. So,
I mean, Baazi Games, of course, scaling up the current verticals, we are definitely going to go into the second and third tier markets now. We're going to be hardly focusing on those markets. And of course, one thing is there that if I keep improving my customer experience, every other metric is going to get aligned automatically. Like my retention cohorts are going to look better, my stickiness quotient is going to be better. Because in a business, the make or break in any business is the cost of reactivation, especially in the e-commerce industry. And you don't want to get there. That's actually one of the difference between a successful and an unsuccessful business. So we want to definitely keep focusing on that as a business and improve how we can make data available across the board. That would be the internal side of things. Apart from that, we are definitely looking out at different games, and like I said, we want to invest into different games. So and we have been talking to a lot of these gamers. So we want to develop localized content and promote that in the country now. And I feel that now is the time when India is also ready for that. That is definitely next for Baazi Games.
Great. And since we are talking on a day when I think a day before government has taken a decision to ban a lot of famous and most popular games in India from Chinese counterpart, how do you think it will impact your business as an industry and especially to Baazi Games?
I mean, it should definitely help the local providers in the country. It will, because sometimes with limited fund, Indians have always struggled with this support that has come indirectly from the government or directly. Will definitely help a lot of young talent to produce localized content. And we've seen in the past that Indians, if they get to work, they can produce quality stuff. So India is actually reaching that phase. So a thing like this will definitely promote. I mean, banning of TikTok also helped a lot of these organizations pop up, and some of them have really done well as well. So something like banning PUBG. I know a lot of these localized shooting games as well that have produced really excellent content. So they will get an automatic push as well. And for us, we will definitely keep striving to find what really works for the Indian audiences and keep focusing on producing better content.
Great. Fantastic. And what would be your piece of advice to them in the current scenario?
If I have to advise, I mean, all the entrepreneurs need to really prioritize things better. Sometimes I feel a lot of entrepreneurs are really focused on quick growth, like I mentioned, and they overlook some key things in the business. They should definitely focus on aligning all the teams and make sure that their vision is well understood across the board. And they should never be satisfied. I mean, customer experience is something that has no there is no threshold, there's no ceiling to customer experience. So they need to be keep installing that culture across the board where that nothing is enough. They have to keep focusing on the long-term strategies, and they have to keep imbibing that culture. And like I mentioned again, you asked a very good key important question as well. What has been the biggest advantage for someone like me in this industry is the fact that I have backed my gut instincts as well, and I've tried to learn from all the mistakes, documented very, very well all the mistakes, and from that data I've tried to make more informed decisions. Sometimes when people end up making mistakes, they don't really evaluate that in a very analytical kind of a way and figure out why that happened. So having those documentations in place of every A/B test that you have done in the organization plays a very key role for all the new joinees and the scale and the growth of the company. Yeah.
Great. So two takeaway for me is, one is nothing is enough for customer experience.
Yeah.
And second is I think gut and data go hand in hand for you.
Exactly.
Right. And I think very well put, because data is obviously based on the past, right? And gut is basically on future. So you have to have some kind of a thin line between that and to take a decision for that.
Exactly.
And with this, Navkiran, we are coming to our last question, which you have already answered, but still, because we are not recorded at that time, so I'm asking you again that what came in your mind when you first said the name of my book, and what are views on the same? And
I mean, like I said, for someone who's just starting out or someone even at any scale of the business,
Right.
I mean, they need to really understand this meaning better. I mean, when I say Junoon, Jarurat and Jugaad, it just gives me an idea, okay, fine, this is, passion, customer experience and Jarurat. How do I actually do all of those things? So it's very relatable to everyone, this book. I mean, if I think about it, if I was starting out, I wouldn't really understand the importance of customer experience at the start of my, journey. I did not. I grew on the data, and if there was some piece of advice like this, where, someone came and told me this is very important for your business,
Right.
that would really help. And, I would, and so a lot of these guys wouldn't even be able to comprehend the meaning of customer, experience or all these factors initially. So, Junoon, Jarurat and Jugaad would help them understand it better. It's more relatable to every single one of us. And
Right.
that's all we do in our business, right? I mean, it's driven by passion, it's driven by Junoon, and there is a Jugaad. I mean, of course, when we say Jugaad, there is data for everything, and you do Jugaad around that data and make that gut instinct call.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic, Navkiran. I think it's been a wonderful insight from you on a lot of issues. And once again, I would like to thank you for sharing your time and sharing your journey so honestly and with so much passion. And wish you, Puneet and Saurabh, all the best for your ventures. And we look forward for new milestone from Baazi Games.
Thank you. Look forward to reading your book. Good luck.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Navkiran. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh.